Alright my friends, we're back at San Francisco CrossFit and today we're talking about handstand push-ups. I'm going to do a video series on handstand push-ups. I'm going to talk about kipping handstand push-ups and strict handstand push-ups. And a lot of people have this little controversy where they're like, oh, kipping handstand push-ups is cheating, or you need to have strict handstand push-ups before you perform kipping handstand push-ups. Well, all that is actually BS because it's just a spectrum of movement where you can enter that movement spectrum wherever you want. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, but before we even get into the business of handstand push-ups, strict and kipping, or whatever it may be, we're going to talk about basic pushing mechanics and how that pushing mechanics actually applies into performing a handstand. So check this out. Let's get down low. We're going to get on the floor. We talked about push-ups in previous videos, and one of the things that we talked about was application of force. I want to make sure that my elbow is on top of my wrist and that there's a vertical forearm so I can apply force properly. One of the things that we did to solve that was we flipped the hands, we placed them here, and that blocked me into performing a push-up where the elbow remains right on top of that wrist. But what happens? Am I going to perform my handstand push-up in this shape? I could, but ideally, I operate here. So that's the first thing we want to think about. In another video that you may have watched, I played around with different hand positions. I moved the hands out to the side, the hands over my head, but I also did one where I moved my hands down towards my feet. What happens when I move my hands down towards my feet? This. I move the hands, shoulders start traveling forward, shoulders start traveling forward. If I perform a push-up in that position, it starts feeling pretty heavy and pretty loaded. So what do we naturally do? Well, we move away from load, we move away from pain, and one way to move away from pain as I move my hands closer to my feet is by picking my hips up. What does this kind of look like? Oh, something like a downward dog. That downward dog now can start looking like something pressing overhead. And that's a very mild downward dog, as you saw. One thing that we see with people performing a pressing motion in that shape is the head going through the arms. This. If you pay attention to my elbow here, look what it's doing. It's just coming out to the side. How do we avoid that from happening? Well, we go back to where we started. Hands, palms facing forward. Place my hands on the ground. Pick my hips up. And now if I perform a push-up there, where are my shoulders going to go? Forward. Where does my elbow stay? On top of my hand. So that's where everything starts. Can you perform a downward dog, handstand push-up, or scaled handstand push-up and place your head on the ground? If you can do that, you're ready for the next step, which is simply flipping the hands around. Pay attention here. Hips are up. I come down to the bottom. That feels kind of uncomfortable, but now I'm going to mimic that pattern. Just forward. Elbow remains on top of the wrist. That's just the long roundabout we took to saying maintain the same principles of pushing mechanics no matter if you're doing a push-up or a handstand push-up. This is the beginning of something very special. For full access to this video series and more content for the modern mover, join the movement and subscribe to Freestyle Connection today.